The call for free education and the protest actions that have led to the shutdown of universities have highlighted the limits of public funding. The different tiers of government have to provide public services and goods, and they have to do so from limited resources. In an economy as challenged as ours, what should our priorities be, and how should those in authority budget for the country's needs? To discuss the budgetary process required to provide the most with limited resources, I'm joined by the Director of Lenomo Strategic Advisors, Mr. Thabang Motsohi. Thabang Motsohi, pleasure to have you with us once again.
Tim. Thank you very much for inviting me.
And this discussion is born out of the conversation we had looking at what was going on in the nation, particularly at university level, and the fact that, it could be that different stakeholders have different understanding of how allocations are made in the budgetary process, right? Just broadly speaking, explain what the role of the budget is as a political instrument.
Well, Tim, look, a budget is a mediated outcome, actually. Why do I call it a mediated outcome? It's a mediated outcome because there are competing needs that have to be accommodated within limited resources. And the people that actually do that determination as to which shall receive whatever amount is Treasury. They have all types of expertise available to them to be able to measure this. But remember, if you are in a village that requires a road and was previously not served by a road, that is going to uplift, the standard of living of the people, that is going to provide services, that is going to provide transport, and many other needs, clinics, schools, etc. For those people, that road may be a matter of life and death.
Yes.
And there are other needs too in other communities that are different. It may not be a road in this case, it may be water. Now, if we say that all communities that have their specific needs should pursue those needs using force or violence, what type of a society are we trying to build? These are the critical issues that must always be taken into account. Now, Treasury weighs all these things. But I think what we need to remember is that we have a very fragile democracy, extremely fragile. And I would like us to just have a look at a few indicators that show how fragile it is. If you look at, for instance, the wealth and income gaps, the Gini coefficient, for instance, which measures the gaps in terms of wealth, puts, for instance, income at about 0.7, and the wealth index at 0.9 to 0.95. That is massive. Major economies don't have those type of numbers. If you look at, for instance, the population that is not employed, nor educated, and not in training, what is normally used, called the NEET population, which is over 57% of the unemployed. These are serious statistics. And consider again that every year our primary public education system spews out minimum 450,000 students under what we call dropout rate. These are the students that are not going to, that are considered not sufficiently ready to be able to pass the matric exam.
Let's pause right there. Let's pause right there.
Yes.
Because I want us to have a better appreciation for that statistic. And you've mentioned several things, but I want to stay with the number of 450,000 of those who drop out of the basic education system, which takes 12 years, that system, right?
Yeah.
Our primary education system.
Exactly.
So, because we normally focus only on the matriculants and that's about it. So it means then, therefore, that over the period of the basic education, you have 450,000 times 12 that are coming out of the system and are not going to receive further education and training. Do I understand you correctly?
Basically what you have is that for a cohort that starts in year one, next year, by the time they complete, after 12 years of schooling, 50% have dropped out for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, so, okay.
That is the reality that we have.
Yes.
And it is a very, very important number to remember because, 19.5 million adults of working age population as we speak do not have matric qualification, and they're unemployed.
19.5 million.
19.5 million. Now, these are very serious statistics.
Yeah.
And what do they point to? They point to a very critical problem that we have in the schooling system. And it has been identified. There's been a number of research efforts that have really tried to understand why do we have this problem. And it's simply this, Tim. A child in grade 3 moving into grade 4. At grade 3, the child basically is learning to read. When they move into grade 4, it should be reading to learn. There, at that level, that's where the sickness is. We have a fundamental problem with trying to make sure that our children get into grade 4 knowing how to read to learn. Now, if you're not able to have that skill at that level, to pick it up by the time you get to grade 7 or even grade 9 is almost impossible. Now, that's the challenge that we have. Now, you tell me that we have a challenge, a tertiary education with students that are now requiring the government to fund all the fees for everybody. In my view, respectful view, the challenge we have is to make sure that we have children that have very high cognitive levels such that they're able to move into tertiary level and proceed successfully. The current situation is that at university level, over 60% of the kids fail first and second year. And these are the kids that are sponsored and supported by NFS.
Yes.
What do we do then? If you look at that very, very coldly, you might say, really, the return on investment at tertiary level is extremely poor. Why do I have to look at that with more seriousness, when in fact, I can actually have what you call a long-term corrective effect by intervening at grade 3 and 4, by ensuring that at those two levels, I have the best teachers to do that job.
We'll go back to the money side of things in a moment, but I understand you to mean that what we should be looking at are qualitative issues.
Absolutely.
First.
Absolutely.
And then we can move to the quantitative, especially the resource allocation, the funding thereof.
Precisely, because you see, what you are saying is that which is our most critical need? We need highly qualified, manpower resources in order to be able to staff our developing economy, which is actually moving into what you call a technical high skills trajectory. That is where we are. Now, the conundrum that we have, which Pali Lehohla always talks about, Commissioner for Statistics South Africa, is that why is it that the data that we have does not seem to influence the assumptions that have gone into determining the current type of policy direction and, economic policy direction and strategy? Why is it like that? We have these massive numbers of unemployed people, but we are creating an economy that requires highly skilled people, which we are failing to produce in the second place, because our system does not prepare our kids to be in such a situation that they're able to deal with the challenges of tertiary education. Where then do you start? That is the conundrum that we have.
So, you've outlined the problem. In that kind of situation, where now the budget must kick in, then you must prioritize, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because
you've got competing interests. There's water that must be provided. There's a road that must be built. There's healthcare that must be provided, and so on. So, confining ourselves to education, given the facts and the data, the statistics that we have at our disposal, and we can see, how should we be budgeting then? What should we, before budgeting, how should we be prioritizing?
The question is, if you look at education, for instance, it receives, I think, the highest component in the budget.
Yeah, probably 25% or more.
The question really is, are we doing what we are supposed to be doing in the education system efficiently enough to deliver the outcomes that we desire? Unfortunately, we don't. And that is where we need to focus. How do we ensure that we have achieve those levels of efficiencies in order to deliver, for instance, the correct outputs at the school level? Now you'll be in a position to tackle the university level and reduce the current dropout rates at first year and second year. Because these are massive numbers. Remember, these kids, most of them are sponsored, and they hardly ever finish first year and second year. Where do you think they go? They add up to those numbers that I talked about, the NEET numbers, unemployed numbers that are swelling every year. Remember, every year our unemployment numbers keep on increasing because we are not investing enough in our economy to create new factories, new employment opportunities, etc.
Let me bring it to the current situation, this discussion now.
Yes.
From the point of view of the students who have been demonstrating and who are saying until such time that government relents, the universities must not reopen. How do you explain this situation to them? Because my sense is that, and I'll tell you a story, brief one. Recently, I checked the number that there was about 10.9 billion rands that was being owed by students who received the funding from government, that NEFSAs, right, who are employed. Because if you're not employed, you don't have to pay it back until such time that but it's 10.9 billion rands that seemingly could be paid by those who are currently employed, who were given these loans. And of course, the reaction, was that I'm out of my mind. How could I suggest that? Yes. So it was just one suggestion.
Yes.
So what do you tell them? How do you fix the problem so that the university system can get back on its feet?
I think one of the things that we have to accept is that the fight by the students is for a good cause. The difference is that you actually spoil that fight if you do the sort of things that they are doing now. The other question is, can we afford to do what they're asking for? The simplest straight answer is that absolutely impossible. It cannot be done. We now have a HEHA commission, that has been set up by the president to look into this question of long-term sustainability and of funding, university education or tuition and how that can be done. Why not we allow that commission to finish its job? This is not a very simple task. It's a very complex task. Everybody has presented, but the judge himself said that students have been avoiding to come and present. Now you ask yourself, why are they not presenting their cases to the judge? Is it because they're, it may not be intellectually sound? Is it because it is not well researched? I don't know, and I'll be the last one to throw aspersions to what they're trying to do. But the point of the matter is that we need to be in a situation where we have calm minds, allow the commission to do its work, let's look at its output. Treasury now will be in a position to say, this is the extent to which we can accommodate these requests or not. It is not for the students to say that ours must be funded to the exclusion of everything else. It cannot be done. But we're a responsible government.
I have a suspicion that in some quarters, there may be poor understanding of how resources are allocated, right? Because the government itself does not have money. In South Africa, we talk loosely about government has money, as if government produces money or creates money. Because the money that we call government money comes from the taxpayers, right? And other means through which tariffs or whatever taxes are levied on companies and so on. And then it can only go up to a certain point. Or you have to introduce new taxes. So can government create new money then, just to be controversial or to help take this discussion forward?
Well, Tim, it's a good question and a very difficult one to respond to, but no government really, very few governments are able to fund all their expenditures out of the revenue sources that, they manage. It is impossible. We are currently running at something like 3.9 or whatever deficit, which means the difference between what we collect in terms of tax revenue and what we need to spend. And how do you fund that gap? You fund that gap by going to the bond market, by going to investors, global investors, to help fund the gap. You issue what you call IOU, which you normally call bonds. And this is the money that actually makes us go. Now, you remember the last time we talked, we discussed, I mentioned the question, the issue of stability. Stability is the most priced commodity in the world now. Because if you don't have stability, what do you think the investor is thinking when they look at the situation in your country and you're asking them to come and put money to fund your budget deficit? This is the challenge that we have. You must be aware that we cannot fund all our needs ourselves, and we have to depend on others rather, to be able to help us do so. And that is where the foreign investors come in and others come in. But how do you expect them to come in when we have a chaotic situation, when you have political instability? And in fact, what has been happening in the past 2 weeks at universities contributes significantly to that instability.
And may even lead to a downgrade at a certain level.
I would absolutely, I would have no doubt about that. I mean, if I'm sitting there, the question is, how do you explain a situation where seemingly educated people go on to destroy property? Then the assumption is that if we have similar, riots, at other levels that are lower than educated people, then I must expect total chaos. That's the conundrum. That's the choice that I should have as an investor. Can I have that type of argument? Can I extend that logic to that level? I'm not sure it will be absolutely correct to do so. But we have a situation, and it is so important, therefore, that government must be seen to lead. Government must take action. Government must take responsibility. Make sure that, all those that are given the right to protest peacefully. And if you don't, we have the legal system to take care of that. We have the state security to take care of that.
Yeah.
And that is where we are now. Unfortunately, these are the realities that we have to face.
Okay. Well, and it's all about choices as well.
Thank you
and
so much.
understanding how the system works. Thanks very much for talking to us. Thabang Motsohi is the director at Lenomo Strategic Advisors, and giving strong warning that we've got to look after something that may be outside our point of view, and that is maintaining stability in order to attract the money that we need and borrow in order to sustain some of the needs that are emerging in our society. And I think we've got to take heed of that advice.